In this podcast, I talked to Professor Jay Cummings, who is a professor of math at Sacramento State University in the US. And I came across Professor Cummings' books back when I was taking reanalysis, which was about 2 years ago from now. And I fell in love with his writing style, the conversational tone, the pacing of the book, the self containedness of the book, as opposed to other textbooks. And ever since then, I've been following his work, his YouTube channel, and I've been wanting to talk to him for a very long time. So this podcast is really close to my heart. So we talk about all kinds of things. We talk about his undergraduate math journey, his views on how math is taught, how math is talked about, and how we write math textbooks, and a lot more. So hope you enjoy this podcast. Um, it was really fun shooting this one. On that note, when you were an undergrad, how was your math learning style? Because from what I've experienced, I tend to do best when I practice a lot of problems. And when finish textbooks cover to cover, I come away with a really good understanding as opposed to just doing the problem sets assigned by
Mhm.
the course instructor. Um, because I don't know why. Maybe I just need more practice than others. But how was your undergrad experience? Was it similar?
Yeah.
Any struggles?
Yeah. So as an undergrad, I was very fortunate in one way, in which that there were a lot. So I went to my state university, so in the same town that I grew up in, and
Hmm.
just a normal state university. But I had this cohort of other math majors, right? We entered school at basically the same time. We were taking many of the same courses together, and they were very talented. Like I feel so fortunate that I ended up in that study group. And we did. That's what we did. We formed like a study group, and we took a lot of courses. Almost all of them we took together. Um, and it was extremely valuable. And soon, like my school has a PhD program, so we took a bunch of graduate courses too. And yeah, it was awesome. W- of course, there's struggle, right? We took a lot of math classes, and they got increasingly more difficult. But but it was, I mean, looking back, I'm sure in the moment maybe there was more, uh, at times more pain than pleasure. But looking back, I mean, I just have such fond memories of
Hmm.
sitting in Avery Hall on that third floor conference room and just working on problems. And they would come back to the dorm that I would in the basement of it. There was like a hangout spot, and they serve food and stuff, and we just sit there and we work. And not many of us had jobs. Maybe none of us had jobs except for tutoring math type jobs through the university. So it was a lot of math, a lot of the time, with very few distractions. So I feel very fortunate to have been in a situation where, I didn't have to be working, 20 hours a week at some job distracting me. I didn't have to commute a long distance to get to school, and I had this amazing study group that we all went through it together. So yeah, that's one thing I'll say is having a group of people who you can work with, I think is quite valuable, especially nowadays when if you're on your own, it's so easy to get distracted by so many things, right? I mean, your phone is just a portal to so many things. Some of them interesting, some of them just time sucks, which whether you like it or
Hmm.
not, it's gonna grab your attention. So, I think especially now having people around you, there's social pressure to just stay on task and people with you to discuss problems and work through them together without jumping to a solution. So yeah, I struggled, but in many ways, I thought I ended up in a very good situation for me personally.
Hmm. I'm curious about the culture around math back in your university. So oftentimes when I tell people that I'm studying math, the first thing that they say is, "Oh, I hate math. I was always bad at it, and you must be so smart because you're studying math."
Uh,
And I feel like because of this attitude, there's often a lot of comparison within an undergraduate math cohort. This person's faster than me, or they're getting better grades, or perhaps they are just better at math, and
mhm.
people feel afraid of asking. quote unquote dumb questions in class, when in reality, 10 other people have the same question as you.
Hmm. Hmm.
So was that a part of like, did you have similar experiences or not quite? Because it sounds like your cohort was very healthy, like the attitude towards math and each other.
Yeah, for us, so when I was an undergrad, yeah, it was a very productive, healthy relationship. And it was also really good in the sense that it was weird. Like each of us was different, sort of excelled the most at a different area of math. So each of us was kind of the leader in one of the courses or sequence of courses. The other one was kind of more of a lead in that. So it actually, I mean, it worked out so well. So yeah, I didn't. I mean, there are certainly times where I myself felt like, oh, I don't want to ask a question because it's probably a dumb question. So, I mean, everyone is susceptible to this. Um, but I don't know. I think I've discovered that more as a professor than I did as a student. As a professor, I see this a lot in my students,
I
where
see.
I ask, if I do a proof on the board or discuss the main idea of a proof or something, to talk about an example, and I say, are there any questions? Um, Oftentimes there'll be no questions. If I say, what questions do you have? It's a little bit more inviting. Maybe I might get more likely to get a hit, even though it's just changing a few words around. It's like, okay, what questions do you have? It's more direct, like, okay, I'm waiting for you to tell me the
Mhm.
answer. And I sit, and sometimes I'll stand there and wait, until it's a little uncomfortable because some student might be sitting on their hands just until it's a little uncomfortable, then they'll ask the question. But also, if I say, okay, why don't you turn to your neighbor, so talk to someone next to you, and ask them a question about what I did. Then there's a lot of chatter. Everyone, a lot of people might have a question that they don't really want to ask, but it's like, okay, think of some question and just ask your neighbor about it. Just talk it through. People will talk about some part about the proof or the theorem or the example, whatever. So that sort of shows that there are questions to be asked, but people
Mhm.
are nervous, and understandably, because for for example, you might be you're confused about a proof because it says it uses this lemma. Well, you didn't even understand that lemma, so
Mhm. Mhm.
you're asking a question about, does this type of function have this property? Well, you don't even understand what the property means really yet. So, I
Yeah.
mean, I think there are very good reasons why, especially in math, when things build on each other so much, that you might feel worried because it's not just like, okay, I have one issue with this one line in the proof. No, there's deeper things. But nevertheless, I try to set up an environment when I'm a professor to try to encourage people to feel confident, to ask questions and set up these situations where they can ask each other questions, um, because because I understand that this is a real thing that many students uh, have to deal with.
Interesting. So curiously, so I've heard that I was watching another podcast with I think it was three Grant Sanderson from 3B1B with Stephen Strogatz.
Ah,
And Professor Strogatz was talking about how even at math colloquiums, sometimes professors themselves hesitate to ask a question
mm.
because they are
Oh
not
yeah,
as familiar with the field as, well, the presenter. Especially in the field like math, when research has become so specialized, you need to know so much in order to even understand a problem from someone else's field.
yeah.
Professors also sometimes hesitate to ask questions in colloquiums. Has that been your experience, or have you seen your colleagues feel that way, or any colloquiums that you attended as a grad student or now that you're a professor?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, so colloquium have this, yeah, a colloquium, these talks are often about the professor's research. So you bring in a notable professor who has done some deep research in some very niche area of math. I mean, if the colloquiums back in 1700, where it's like, okay, there are two areas of math, so let's discuss one of them, and everyone knows the areas of math, so it's nothing. There's no shock factor. Nowadays, there is so much math. No one's going to understand. Um, I mean, if you find someone in a different area of math, there is so much stuff that they know that you don't know. So much, especially if you have a good researcher in any one of the many deep areas of math. So yeah, I mean, even if you're in the same area of math, by the way, even if you're in the area, but you just work on different aspects of it, still you might get completely lost during a colloquium talk because yeah, there's so much. Again, it goes back to the course. Math builds on itself. It's like they're talking about something way up there, but you don't even understand the concepts and the definitions way down at the foundation. So that's just inevitable that that's going to happen. Also, yeah, we all get nervous. Um, e- e- Math anxiety never goes away. Everyone wishes they were better at math. If you think Terrence Howe doesn't wish he were better at math, I'm sure he does. So everyone wishes they knew a little bit more and was a little bit better. So yeah, I think that's just the way it is. Um, yeah. And
Mhm.
also, by the way, it's also hard to ask a good question if you don't really understand the field well enough. I was going to make another point, but I forget what I was going to say. So go ahead.
Mhm. Of course. So I think there was this, yeah, I was reading this essay by William Thurston. I do not remember the name of the essay, but it's a really popular one. And I'm going to quote something. So he says, for example, one effect often takes place during colloquium talks, where one or two widely knowledgeable people sitting in the front row may serve as the speaker's mental guide to the audience. And I feel like this rings true not just for colloquiums, but also for classes,
Uh-huh.
um, like math courses. When I take math courses, I've noticed that the students that speak up the most are like the professor's mental guide towards where the class is at.
Uh-huh.
Because naturally, if half of the class isn't speaking, you're going to focus on the three or four students who are asking questions.
Uh-huh.
And depending on how much these students understand,
Uh-huh.
you will determine how much the rest of the class understands.
Hmm.
Now, if three of these students are getting everything and they're really fast, then the professor's of course going to assume that okay, students are understanding things and they're going to pick up the pace. But in
Uh-huh.
reality, that might not be quite true. So, was this an experience you had in undergrad or not quite? Or now that you're teaching?
Yeah, I think it was as an undergrad. I mean, I was one of the stronger undergrads, so
Mhm.
um,
I
uh,
see. So you were the one sitting in the front row.
exactly. So I was the one who
I
was
see. I see.
perhaps wrongly encouraging the professor to keep a good pace. Um, but yeah, no, certainly, as an undergrad, I would talk to some of my classmates um, who were, just an average classmate, and yeah, certainly they would have some issues further back, or they would have benefited from a slower pace. And yeah, as a professor, I do try to keep this in mind. For example, I mentioned how I have students talk to each other. Don't ask me a question about what I just did. Ask your neighbor a question about what I just did, and that's I think can be a very good way to, because I can sort of go in and out of listening to different conversations, and then I can get sort of a broader sense of where the class is at, not just where the top two students are at. Um, so so yeah, and certainly I think the nature of a math class to want to keep up a good pace, because
Mhm.
everything builds. So it's not like, you know, in some social science class, perhaps, okay, we have five topics. None of them are that much more important than the other. And if we only do four of the five, no big deal. It's still a good course. Uh, for some extent, it's true for math too. But there are certain topics which are at the end of the course, and those are sort of the biggest topics, right? Those are the things that you're really building towards all semester. So it's a bit of a letdown to not get to it. And especially if the class is a prerequisite for another class, then the classes build on each other in a way that doesn't happen nearly as much in other courses. So there's extra motivation to try to keep up a good pace too. So yeah,
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
professors need to slow them. If they have any excuse like, oh, no questions from the class, okay, everyone's got it. Let's keep moving on. There's yeah, the wins are always pushing you at your back, pushing you forward. So yeah, I agree. There are many reasons why this becomes an issue.
Mhm. So I'm curious, have you had the chance to teach graduate students?
Not really. Not for
Hmm.
a full class. I've worked with graduate students in a few various ways. So my current institution has a master's program, but no PhD program. Um,
Oh,
yeah. So we teach some master classes. I'll start teaching them soon. I haven't been in a big hurry to jump into them, but we just are launching a new combinatorics class that I will certainly be teaching probably every other time it runs. So um, yeah, my current institution is it's a Cal State school, which it's like like in California with the UC system, University of California system.
hmm.
Those are many world-class universities, and they have very good PhD programs, top professors. And there's the Cal State school, Cal State system, which is much larger, teaches way more students. I think the Cal State system, I think is the biggest university system in the world. I want to say it's like 500,000 students or something.
That
Anyways,
is, yeah, that's a lot of students.
it's very big. Yeah, I think 23 campuses, something like that. So, yeah, so so this system has some PhD programs. Maybe not, probably not in math. Maybe one or two in math. I'm not sure. But it's mostly just undergrad and master's programs.
I see. How large is the math cohort that your department? Also, is there, I'm assuming there's only one math department, right? Or multiple math
Correct.
departments?
Mhm.
One math department. So what's the average size of your cohort?
Like how many
The math
graduate each
cohort.
year?
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
we, how many do
as
we
math
graduate?
majors.
I would guess between one and 200 a year.
Between one,
200 math majors a year, something like that.
okay, 200 at least.
No, 1 to 200, I would say. Maybe
Okay,
150, I would guess. Thinking off the top
as
of
an
my head.
average.
Yeah, a number of math majors. Yeah. So the school has like 25,000 students or something. Is that right? Maybe I'm going a little high. Let's say 100 a year. Something like that.
Okay, so it's fairly typical to have like okay, let me not reanalysis. Economics majors also did reanalysis. Differential. No, let's take topological space. So is it common to have like a topological spaces class to have like 50 students?
Um,
Like the third year, fourth year math courses, is it common to have like at least 50 students?
yeah. So yeah. So like
Wow.
so
Okay.
well. Okay. So we would have um. So every math major has to take like real analysis. Okay. So and we have a we have a 2 semester real analysis course, and usually there's usually in the fall we'd run 2 sections of the real analysis part A, um, and 1 section of real analysis part B in the fall. And in the spring, we
Hmm.
run 2 sections of the B and 1 section of the A. And each section will have maybe 25 students. So we're probably having, so like 70, maybe 50 students take the A in the fall, divide into 2 classes though. So the classes are reasonable size. And then 50 in taking the B in the spring, but then another 25 who are kind of off by a semester. So yeah,
Hmm.
it's
Hmm.
a lot. How big is your school?
Yeah, I was asking this question precisely to compare it to my university. We have like 10 math majors in my batch,
Wow.
which is, I mean, next to nothing, right?
Yeah.
So we don't
Yeah.
really have as much of a math culture at my home institution,
I see.
unfortunately.
How many students are
Um,
at your entire, how many undergrads are at your entire institution?
3,200.
3,200. Okay.
So it's a small college in general, and it's also a
Yeah.
liberal arts college, um,
Okay.
which is to say that it doesn't, math, physics, biology are not as popular as economics, psychology, or computer science even. Although bio is pretty popular. So
Got
yeah,
it.
one thing that I would like to mention is so I was reading this, I don't know where, this comment somewhere about how a professor wanted to, or how a department wanted to encourage his graduate students to ask more questions. So they did this experiment where the incoming batch of graduate students, like the first years, they had an introductory class, like some required course they had. And one of the first lectures, the professor just started to basically lecture nonsense or like lecture really, really hard material. And some of it was like made up. And by the end of the lecture, like an hour and a half lecture. The professor asked the students any questions, and no one like raised their hand or anything. And then the professor revealed that every most of the material was made up, and that the reason you got selected into this school is because we expect you to ask questions when things don't make sense.
Uh-huh.
So, and thus we made up the material because no one can understand this. It's made
Uh-huh.
up.
Interesting.
And I think that was a, I mean, I wasn't even in the class. I just read this story. And yet it was impactful enough for me to ask questions whenever I'm sitting in any course, whether that be math or sociology, of physics. So, yeah.
That's good. That's very good. Yeah, I like
Hmm.
that. Yeah, when I was a student,
Yeah.
there were definitely more times where I would get behind in one course because I was, I took bunch of math courses and other courses too, and uh, and yeah, I wonder if I had applied that rule because there were a lot of times where I would be kind of lost and I hadn't, uh, I'm kind of at times I might be a week behind basically, where I kind of have been lost for a week and then I just need to sit down and catch up. Um, so, and for me, I thought that worked fine. Like, okay, I don't understand it now, but I'll learn it later and it's all good. But, but yeah, I mean, trying to keep up is good. I do think it's often beneficial to see the material more than once.
Mhm. Yeah.
There's this old adage that professors learn more from teaching a class than the students do
Yeah.
because they are seeing the material another time, right? And they've already had some foundation. So, seeing it
Hmm.
another time sort of fills it out in a nice way. So, uh, so if that's true, it's definitely true for students that if you can, read the book ahead of time before class, then the
Yeah.
classroom time is so much more valuable because then you can ask good questions, right? Not just like, what was that definition again? But like, well, what about this particular case? You can get a good feedback in real time. Um, but so yeah, I mean, the fact that I at times would be behind, and then I'm basically just learning the material one time, after the fact, I think does hurt. And I rarely ever read the book ahead of time, but I wish I would have because I think that's a good approach to to getting at what you're saying. Um, so yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. So, I'm curious, do you have any highlights from your, I mean, you mentioned your study group from your undergraduate days. Were there any courses that you particularly loved that you mentioned in other podcasts that you knew that you wanted to go into combinatorics before you applied to graduate school?
hmm
Were there any courses in particular that really stood out or that you really loved, or perhaps professors that you really like taking courses from?
Yeah. So certainly the first combinatorics class I took. I loved it. It was just like this is so fun. You're constantly looking for these bijections and trying to count things in clever
Mm-hmm.
ways, and I just loved it. So certainly that course was quite impactful. The first proofs course I ever took, in a similar way, you're first finding, I first learned about these proofs, right? This ways to logically conclude that this thing is true in a way that is, airtight and no one could dispute it. And my first proofs class there was a lot of number theory involved, which was fun. These baby number theory problems I had I really enjoyed. So yeah, those were good. Um, I don't know. I also liked um, I liked real analysis. I liked a lot of courses. I wasn't too particular. I didn't quite as much like differential equations, um, algebra, I like abstract algebra. I like it as a subject, but I kind of the classes the way I took the classes I did it in probably a poor way that I kind of was introduced to it in a way that was less productive. I'll just say, but but the material was great. But yeah, I sort of I had a bad introduction to it. Um, Based off my own fault. I went into a course. I did a course and I did cut the courses in the wrong order, and that was a problem. But nevertheless,
Like, what did you?
well, okay. So so yeah, so I went to the University of Nebraska where they have a PhD program, and they have these year-long sequences in algebra. So the algebra works out Dubbin and Foote. I don't know if you know that book. And then they have
That's the first algebra course Summit and Foot
for the PhD students. So
for the
they've already
PhD.
had the
Okay, okay, okay,
yeah,
good. Okay,
yeah, exactly. So ideally they would have taken one or two algebra courses in their undergrad, and now they're ready to take this Dubbin and Foote course.
of
And
course, yeah.
um, I just jumped right into the dominant foot course. I didn't do it. So the first time I learned what a group was in this course with a bunch of PhD students sitting around me learning how to dominant foot. And it was just I wasn't ready for it. I mean, I kind of kept up a little, like I did okay grade wise, but like, but it was all local. Okay, I need to understand this one little thing. I need to understand this one
Yeah.
little thing. If I had started, taking the undergrad algebra course, I just would have appreciated it much better. I'm sure I would have had the big picture in my mind. Like taking this double foot course, I just was kept thinking like, okay, like the integers mod p, and I kept going back to that because I think the only example I knew. Um, so yeah, I just did it wrong. So I was, didn't really appreciate it as much as I could have. But yeah, I liked a lot of math classes, but certainly the first combinatorics class I took, I just loved it. And then yeah, we had a year-long the sort of graduate year-long sequencing combinatorics. I did that one next, and that was just wonderful. And yeah, so uh, big fan of combinatorics during my undergrad years.
I wasn't aware. Would you say combinatorics is? I mean, I was about to say is combinatorics a mainstream field of math, but then combinatorics is so big. I suppose I need to pick one field in there. But from the impression that I've gotten, is it typical to be offered a combinatorics course or a sequence of combinatorics courses at a university in the US? Or is that too
Yeah,
broad of a question to answer?
no, I would say most universities would have a combinatorics course, and I would almost guess that uh, more undergrads in the States take combinatorics than like topology, like than like a full course in topology.
And these are math majors you're talking about.
Math majors, yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So I mean, everyone takes a real analysis, a group theory, um,
Hmm.
and obviously calculus and differential equations and linear. Everyone takes some linear algebra course, even though a lot of them are more focused on matrices than
Interesting, right.
function spaces and stuff. Um, but and then yeah, so everyone takes those, and then whether you take topology or combinatorics or sort of a real linear algebra course or like Galois theory or deeper into real abstract algebra, things like that. I think that's more dependent on the university and stuff. But I think
Oh,
yeah, so I'd say combinatorics is sort of a secondary course. Most universities would be an optional course, but yeah, I would say
hmm
most offer it and a lot take it. Maybe not quite as much as like number theory, but yeah, not far behind. It's a lot of places. It's more or less a staple.
And okay, now I feel a lot better about my university because I had Galois theory, I had field theory, I had metric and topological spaces right after reanalysis and group theory. And I mean, I was struggling a lot.
That's great.
I was, fun- yeah. I mean, my grades weren't the best, but they were pretty bad. But I was really, really struggling. So it's good to know
Yeah.
that these are hard courses and they aren't offered
Oh
everywhere.
yeah. Yeah, very much. So like I've been mentioning these graduate courses. So I saw Galois theories in undergrad, but only because I took the second
The graduate
semester
level
of the
one.
PhD course
Mm-hmm.
that we got there. Otherwise, there was yeah. My university, which is sort of just a standard university in the States, so it's in the middle, maybe a little bit above the middle, but not way above. That yeah, in order to see something like Galois theory, you would have to have gone far out of the sort of the traditional curriculum path. So that's great that you do it. I mean, yeah, these are just preferences. All you could build a degree using any of this material. But I like the way your university does it. I think going all the way to Galois theory, I think is a great thing. It really collects a lot of the different concepts in abstract algebra together. So yeah, that's great.
Mhm.
Good for you.
Yeah. No, I'm not saying I understood anything. So I mean, that was one of my most least understood courses ever.
Yeah.
So at least for me, it wasn't the best choice. But you win some, you lose some. I'm curious. So the book of what's the history one that you I think published a year ago? Has it been a
Yeah,
year?
about a
I
year.
think it has been a year. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, there is a section, although I haven't been able to go through the book because I don't have it right now. There was a section on the history of algebra, I think, where
Hmm.
you do cover about we do talk about abstract algebra and the history. Do you feel like writing that textbook was also an illuminating experience for you in the sense that you learned about the motivations of the subjects that you learned during your undergraduate and graduate days? Like you had a better feeling for why certain definitions in reanalysis are the way they are, and why certain objects in abstract algebra are important or given importance, like the normal subgroup or the group in general. The definition seems very arbitrary. Did you feel like writing that book really sharpened your, I don't know, motivations for why certain mathematical objects are important, or not quite?
Yes, absolutely. Um, for one, writing the book is how I learned the material. I have never taken a math history course. My university did not
Yeah.
offer it. My undergrad university didn't offer it. When I was a graduate student, there was an undergrad course. I don't think it was regularly offered, maybe every once a year, maybe even less than that. Um, and I never like TA'd it or anything. So this was entirely a like but I've always been interested in it. Like I want to know this stuff. So I mean, this book took forever to write because I had to read. I mean, the amount of time I spent reading in order to write was crazy. I mean, like it's like okay, I need to write this section. Okay, well, I need to read this book in order to write this section. So I mean, it
Yeah,
was
yeah,
just
yeah, yeah.
so yeah. So I learned a lot, and at the time I was just like I loved it. I was obsessed with it. By the end, if I'm being honest, I was a little burnt out. I was like, okay, this has been so much stuff, and this book is huge, and I just need to stop this. Um, but but yeah, I mean, learning history I think is a really good way to understand things. Exactly, I like the way you said it because in my view, it's a book like this should be read at the end of your undergrad. Don't read it first. Like, okay, this is where
Uh,
I'm going to understand. No, no, no. I think, like what you said, I think if you understand the theory first, you're going to appreciate the history much more than like, okay, here's the history of like you mentioned a group. Yeah, it took a long time to settle on the definition of a group, and many people contributed to it. Like half a dozen made like important contributions to the definition of a group. It's really weird to say because the definition of group is
mhm.
just like here are like four axioms. Like you can just how could six people contribute to the four axioms? Well, it's because it's a big question of what the axiom should be. You want to have them be you don't want to have too many axioms, and in which case it's kind of okay, we're only talking about these two different things, right? If you have too few axioms, okay, you're talking about, then here are 20 interesting things that are groups, but we can't prove anything because they're not strong enough. So, there's a tug and pull to deciding on these things. And, a typical group theory class, day one, here are the axioms okay, as if they were just handed down to mathematicians, and
Mhm,
and then
mhm.
we just started proving things. When that's not the history. The history is it takes time and struggle to try to figure out to settle on it, and especially in a time where you know today everything is like day one of this class. Look at these axioms. Day one of this class, also look at these other axioms. And But thinking axiomatically is in some ways a relatively new part of math. At the same
Yeah,
time,
yeah.
it's also very old. Like Euclid, like the first like book math proof-based math book was Euclid Elements, and he starts off with axioms. So it's not like it's also very old, but like caring about it to the extent that we do today is
Mhm,
new. And a lot of the axiomatic math that we study in undergrad is only 1 to 200 years old. Relatively new in the big arc of math history. Um, so yeah,
mhm,
I think. But once you know the material, it means even more. So yeah, I
mhm.
think I certainly had a new appreciation for so much of the material, um, and I hope readers do too.
Yeah, I'm curious. So the reanalysis book that you wrote, it started off as a course that you were teaching, and you were writing lecture notes for that course. and then you realized, oh, I can turn this into a textbook.
Mhm.
Um, I feel like in the case of math history, it was kind of the opposite. You had interest in math history already, and you wanted to write a book on it, and then you opted to teach a math history course. Is that how it happened?
Yeah. So I think, yeah. So the first time, so the second book was proofs, and that was more what you're saying. Like, I definitely like, okay, I know how to prove things by induction, but I want to write a book on it. I have some ideas to how to, make it a more interesting book than the other ones. And I just sat down and sort of, okay, I want to write the book. So therefore, I should teach the course. Please sign me up for the course. So the proofs book, I think, is more closely to that. The history book, I think, is kind of like that. The first time I taught the course, I hadn't decided yet whether I wanted to write a book. I just wanted, it was a possibility because I'd already written two, but it was, or I guess at that point it was only written one. But yeah, but I was, yeah, but I didn't know for sure because there was so much I didn't know. So I taught the class like 6 or 7 times while writing the book. And every time I taught the class, it was substantially different than the previous time because I learned so much more since the
Mhm.
previous time. Um, and probably by the time I taught the class a couple times, at that point, I was like, okay, eventually I want this to be a book, but but it's nowhere near ready. I mean, I was still, there's no way I don't know enough, and there's so much more that I want to do. So yeah, it was going to be a lot more work. But yeah, so pretty soon it was at least an idea that I wanted to turn into a book, but not immediately, I want to say.
Mhm. Was one of the main challenges the amount of information on a subject, like what to include and what not to include? Was it sifting through all the history and making sure that, okay, this person actually contributed this, I'm not just giving credit to someone because pop culture says they made this up? Or like, what were the main challenges with the history book?
Uh, yeah, there are many challenges. Those are definitely two of them. To your first one, yeah, there is, if it's, I want to write a book on real analysis.
Hmm.
Basically, I know, I mean, without even, uh, on day one, I could just pick up 5 other real analysis books, and they all cover basically the same thing, right? It's like, okay, I'm going to do it differently and hopefully better, but
Hmm.
not. The content is basically already there. Um, and especially when it builds on each other, it's like, okay, if by the end of the course I want to discuss integrals, well, okay, here is the basically the fastest route to get there, and everyone basically follows the fastest route, and yeah, so make some changes, but nothing dramatic. Similar with proofs. With history, there's no like this is the route to. First of all, what do you want to get to? Some history books stop at
Yeah, yeah.
calculus. Some try to do modern math. Um, so what are you going to cover? How are you going to cover it? I mean, yeah, it was a big challenge, and it evolved over the course of the book. What I decided to focus on. So yeah, that was definitely one of the big challenges. Um, yeah, in the end, I decided to basically focus on math that an undergrad would see, or at least potentially see. So,
Hmm.
a lot of history books focus on a lot of modern theory, right? Here's a whole chapter on algebraic number theory. Okay, well, no undergrads know algebraic number theory. Now, is it important to modern math? Sure, right? I mean, if you want to do research today, you want to list out the top 15 areas of math, yeah, it might be one of them, right? But it's not. But undergrads wouldn't have a good appreciation for it.
Hmm.
So I want to include maybe a blurb, maybe a paragraph, but nothing substantial. So yeah, the focus of the book is mostly building up to all the math that undergrads see. So, it starts with numbers. So undergrads saw that back when they were little kids. Numbers,
Hopefully, yeah.
hopefully, arithmetic, some basic methods of proof. Then getting into the beginnings of proofs, Euclidean, Euclid's math, Euclidean geometry, axiomatic math, leading towards, and then it sort of went subject by subject, number theory,
Hmm.
algebra, calculus, real analysis, topology, combinatorics. So these are sort of the main areas. And along the way, I talk about linear algebra and differential equations and stuff. But yeah, you have to focus. I mean, there's so much out there. You can't just say, yeah, I'm going to cover it all. I mean, my book's 700 pages and it doesn't cover it all. So you have to make choices, and that's challenging to make choices. But focusing on undergraduate math was sort of a good way to to just automatically cut it down to a reasonable quantity.
Uh-huh. So who would take this course? You like senior year math students who end up with their degree?
So
Is that the target audience?
yeah. So at my institution, the only prereq is Calc 2,
Hmm.
and it does qualify as for a math minor. So people who are like maybe a computer science major but a math minor might take it because it does, the university counts it for that. Ideally, it is senior math majors. That's the perfect student would be someone in their final semester as a math major who's taken a lot of math and can now appreciate it. Some other schools I think have started to use it. It'll vary from school to school, but yeah, at my school that's what it is.
Okay, I don't know if this is the culture around the United States, the fact that you offer a course like math history, but the math department at my university is reluctant to cross-list any course from even the computer science department, let alone departments like history or departments like perhaps, I don't know, political science.
Okay.
I suppose they're more really pure math heavy focused. Of course, they have reasons and they probably have good reasons to do so. But I feel like a course like math history at the end of my math year would be like the perfect course because
Hmm.
it's like you learned all of this math. Here's how it was developed. Here's the real story behind it.
Hmm.
Here's why the definition of a group is the way that it really is.
Uh-huh.
Almost as if my entire math journey is coming to like a proper end.
Yeah. So
So
my
is
school
it
was,
common?
yeah. Wait, sorry, I interrupted you. Is it common to?
No. Please continue.
Yeah. So yeah, I agree. Having sometimes these are called capstone courses, sort of the final, the stone in the whatever. So that's the metaphor. Yeah. So I think I think it's good to have capstone courses. And I think math for a math major, I think a math history course is a really good capstone course if it's taught, in my opinion, the right way. I mean, you could there are many math history courses that only cover the Babylonians and the Egyptians, right? It's just ancient stuff. And they do 15 weeks of, writing numbers the way the Babylonians did and doing their arithmetic and stuff. And they don't go beyond it, which that is math history. And, if some people might have the opinion that that's the way to do it. At my school, some professors have used to teach it in kind of that way. They would rarely get to anything beyond Euclid. Um, and maybe they do mostly just a course on Euclid's elements, right? It's just geometry, just ancient geometry. Uh, um, so that's one way to do it. If that's the course, I don't think it's a good capstone course, right? It could be done at any point, and it doesn't really. Again, it's not a summary of the degree up to one's math degree up to that point. Um, uh, Conversely, some people might do a ton of modern math that in subjects that they don't understand. Again, I don't think it would be a good capstone course. So, but if you focus on undergrad math, then I think it's great as a final way. Because as you said, you appreciate things in a new way, and not just the also people. You hear these names as you go through your undergrad. Euclid and Euler and Newton and Gauss, and you hear these names, but you never really, it's just a name, right?
Mhm.
So in my math history courses, when I teach it, yeah, we talk about their math. We talk about also who they are. You mentioned it might have been before we recorded
Yeah.
that one of your goals for this podcast is to humanize mathematicians and mathematics. And I think that's awesome. I think it's a really good goal. I love that you're doing your podcast. But and in the same way, I wanted to humanize these mathematicians too. So, I mean, so in the book, I have it's an appendix, and it's the final appendix. It's like 100 pages, so it's big pages, A4 size, and it's just biographical sketches of all these, many of these mathematicians. I don't know, 20 some, 25 or something of them in there. So, so not everyone, but a bunch. And when I teach the course. Okay. So in the book, after every chapter, I'll say from the appendices and sort of mention, hey, check out these things from the appendices. It includes like all the biographies of the people who were important in that chapter. And when I teach it, that's what I do. After a chapter, I'll take a break and say, okay, let's talk about the personal lives of these mathematicians. And we spend 5 minutes talking about this person and 10 minutes talking about this other person. And the more important people get longer biographical sketches, the less important, get a page or two. And I think it's a good way to sort of understand who these people were. And I think it really, yeah, it provides a human side to math. And I can already tell that you have these same inclinations. But yeah, it provides a human side to math that I never had when I was an undergrad, but I would have loved it. So yeah, I hope more people can experience that.
Yes. Are there any particular examples you're thinking of? Because I have a ton. But when you were writing the textbook, learning about
Mhm.
a mathematician, their story, perhaps some of their quirks, or who they were as people, were you thinking of these in mind when you were talking about this stuff right now?
Yeah, let's see here. Who had the best? So Newton's story is very interesting. Um, so he's obviously really a great mathematician. Um, he grew up in this small farming community, and by the time he was born, his dad had died. So between conception and birth,
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
in
Yeah.
that, and he was born prematurely. The doctor didn't even know if he would survive. They said he was so small he could fit in some sort of cup. I don't forget the name of it. So he was very small. People didn't know he survived. His mom was a teenager still. So his mom was giving birth as a teenage widow, which is quite the situation to find herself in. Um, and she didn't have means to support herself and her kids, her child. So she quickly remarried to a man much older than her. Part of the
And much
conditions of the
richer
What's that? Much
and
richer.
much
That's right.
more wealthier. Yeah.
Exactly. So, and one of the conditions of the marriage is that this older guy didn't want Isaac to be there. So
Oh.
Isaac went to live with his grandparents, who also didn't particularly want him. They took him in, but they almost treated him as like kind of like an orphan in his own grandparents' house. So he's like an orphan with his grandparents while his mom is still alive, but she lives 10 miles down the road. Not easy to go 10 miles. So it's this really weird situation where he was like constantly alone, at school, not many friends, and throughout his whole life, he like lived a life as like this hermit researcher. So he went to Cambridge. Why did he go to Cambridge? Because he was a terrible farmer. Thank God for humanity. He was a terrible farmer. So back in those days, today, like you're the smart kid, right? You go to school. But back in those days, it's the kids who weren't good for anything that went to school, or people whose parents were so wealthy and educated that they just wanted their kids to have that experience, so they sent them off to school. So he went to school at Cambridge, which wasn't the Cambridge of today. It was, Newton made it the Cambridge. Was one of the people who made it the Cambridge of today. It was, a school, a nearby school, and and uh, and there were three classes of students based off of how much money you were contributing to tuition, basically. And he was the lowest class. His parents could contribute almost nothing, so uh, he had to wait on the other students. He had to like serve them their meals and stuff, and he had to do custodial stuff around the school. So he was again like in another class of student, and eventually became obviously the Newton we all know. But he rarely worked with other people. He didn't like it. He would prove amazing things and tell nobody. Keep him in his drawer. And 20 years later, someone would ask, "Hey, do you know why the planets move in ellipses?" He's like, "Oh yeah, I did that a long time ago. Would you tell us?" Nah, I don't really want to share it. So he had this like philosophy that you had to I don't know, that you should be learning for your own sake, for the thirst of knowledge. It shouldn't be, yeah, it's a very like noble reason to learn, not to get pride. It shouldn't be for your pride. You shouldn't be like when his first paper he published it anonymously because he didn't. He's like, oh, I don't have need for adoration from people. Of course, when when Leibniz claimed calculus, and everything changed, and there are other instances of that too. But so at times he definitely changed this. But yeah, he's a very interesting person, very unique in many ways. Um, yeah, I don't know. Do you have any comments?
Yeah, so I was really surprised by the pride comment that you said that he believed that pursuing knowledge for the sake of knowledge, not doing it for
Uh,
because of ego or doing it because you feel it
yeah,
makes you better than other people. Because I suppose most people who look over Newton's history, and by look over I mean like look over from the top, they don't go in deep
mm,
into it. What you see is a series of conflicts. The most popular one being with Leibniz, but then also with Christopher Huygens,
mm.
with who was the guy Spring Force Robert something, another
Hook.
person. Yes, Robert Hooke.
Yeah.
Then there was another conflict with someone else about the discovery of some other formula.
Light.
Um,
He had a big thing about light and prisms.
yeah. I think that was Christopher Huygens.
Oh,
Like Huygens. That's the
yeah,
surname, I
Huygens.
think.
Yeah,
Yeah. Um, and then Leibniz, the spat with Leibniz. Um, and then there was a backhanded letter written to a mathematician who, oh, this was Leibniz as well, I think. Leibniz sent Newton a letter. Look, I found this cool power series or something, and I
yeah,
proved something using the power series. And then Newton was like, "Oh, thank you for telling me something I already know. I know five different ways of doing this same thing."
yeah, yeah,
Almost big. So it's interesting to know that he had the pride thing that you mentioned. I never really knew that.
yeah. And it's weird. Not everyone's like that. Leibniz, for example, was very eager to share what he'd done. That's just who he was. I mean, Newton, as himself as a person, didn't want conflict, right? He avoided conflict as much as he could. It led to more conflict in the end, but nevertheless, that was his natural inclination. Leibniz was the opposite. He was sharing everything. He would prove something, he'd publish it. The first paper on calculus was from Leibniz. That's where the controversy begins. Even though Newton probably did much of it first, he didn't publish it first. Leibniz published it first. So it caused this whole thing. And Leibniz, I mean, math was like one of 12 things he did. He did a lot of things. Newton
Yeah,
did
yeah,
a
yeah.
number of things too, in sciences and philosophy and stuff. But like Leibniz was doing
And
everything.
alchemy.
Alchemy, oh yeah, that's the main thing. And no one knew about it until he died. I mean, no one knew nearly the extent of it. I mean, they knew 1% maybe of everything. So, yeah, but Leibniz is a totally different person. Since we're talking about that, do you know Marin Mersenne? So Marin
No.
Mersenne, yeah, so he's a very another interesting. You asked about interesting people whose bios I
Mhm.
learned about. So Marin Mersenne is this
Could you
he
spell their name?
Mersenne.
Mm-hmm. NNE.
Yeah, Mersenne. You know
Oh,
Mersenne
this is
primes? Like,
French. I see. Yeah. Yeah. Please continue.
yeah. So um, I love him. He's great. So he was a monk. He was not a professional mathematician. I mean, like I guess you could, I don't know, but he was a monk. So he had a day job,
Family
basically.
profession was being a monk.
Yeah. Yeah. Professional monk also sounds strange. And and back in these days, right? So he was born 1588, died 1648. In this time, you know, publishing obviously wasn't what it is today. There were some academic societies where people like in Paris would get together, or
Right.
there'd be one in Oslo or something. So there'd be groups of people who would be talking and writing letters and stuff. But it was very focused, right? And then you would get a book would get translated and moved around a little bit, but it was very localized. Mersenne is this amazing person. He loved math, and he would take to writing to mathematicians all across Europe, and maybe even a little bit beyond Europe, but certainly all over Europe. Um, they let's see. For example, here are some people who he wrote to: René Descartes, Blaise Pascal, Johannes Kepler, Pierre de Fermat, Christian Huygens, uh, Evren, I forgot to say his first name, Torricelli, John Wallace, Cavalieri. Robal, Descartes, Galilei, Thomas Harriot, Claude Meydorj, Jean Pell, Michelangelo Ricci, Henry Moore, Johannes Marcus Marci. Anyways, a lot of people, these 18 contributors of math came from 9 countries and would have no occasion to meet or correspond with each other or any of the others on this list. But as it happens, they all have a mutual friend who facilitated a continent-wide collaborative network of scholars. Their mutual friend was this monk named Marin Mersenne. In fact, these 18 represent a small percentage of the hundreds of correspondence Mersenne maintained, spanning at least 11 present-day countries, including France, Spain, England, Germany, Holland, Belgium, Czechoslovakia, Poland, Italy, Egypt, and Turkey. It'll be on Europe too. So all these people from all over the place were writing to Mersenne. He would reply, and he would say, "Hey, this other person from thousand miles away has this other interesting thing that you might be
Mhm.
interested in. Hey, I learned about this other." So he was like a bee spreading the pollen, except he was still, and the flowers would be going back and forth. It was very strange. The metaphors is losing, but yeah. So it's this very very interesting person. He was in Paris. He wrote in Latin mostly. Um, Thomas Hobbes said, quote, "There is more in Mersenne than in all the universities together," end quote. Just a very nice quote. He's a very, very interesting person.
Kind of reminds me of Paul Erdos, or perhaps even modern day YouTube. The way that you can post one lecture and just reach, even if you reach 500 people, that's an entire math cohort at uh, your university.
Yeah.
So, and like 20 times the size of mine. So even Paul Erdos is famous for having many collaborators. Your advisor was a long-time collaborator.
Uh-huh.
So, very interesting.
Yeah, I love the collaborators in math history. I mean, Newton's fascinating in how much he valued being alone. It was fascinating to learn about. Um, but but the collaborators, I love the collaborators. They're like you mentioned Erdos. I mean, Erdos was Mersenne stayed in place and wrote to everyone. Erdos never stayed in place. He was constantly pinging between continents, and back when air travel was not what it is today. I mean, he was just constantly moving around the world, talking to people, giving lectures, and then just researching 16, 18 hours a day. Um, yeah, it's
Yeah,
very,
just
very
living and breathing
interesting.
math.
Yeah, I mean, it was,
Yeah.
yeah, it's for the love of the game, right? I mean, that's why he did it. He loved math. He loved doing math with others. Um, and and he was in a situation very unique, right? I mean, if he weren't as talented as he was, he probably wouldn't be able to just show up at Princeton and be like, "Hey, I'm going to be here for 2 weeks. Someone take care of me." But he was able to do that, and he lived a life that, uh, you know, it's the life he wanted to live, and he got to live it fully, and it's amazing.
Yeah. It's very interesting for me to see how the people that shape math to such great degrees, like great teachers, people who are willing to publish and collaborate with other people
Hmm.
without bringing their ego and pride in, like who push mathematics forward. I sometimes feel like they aren't given as much credit as they would deserve.
Mm.
Um, for instance, whenever I'm talking to any professor or even someone who's a graduate student, it is almost certainly the case that they have had a good teacher of math or like a positive experience of math because there was someone in their life
Uh-huh.
who presented math as this exciting thing.
Uh-huh.
Or I think you mentioned that you already had an interest in math while you were growing up. I'm not sure if you said it came from your parents or they gave you puzzles of at some age, I think. But I don't quite remember. You
Yeah,
mentioned this
so
in some other podcast.
yeah, when I was in high school, I joined the math club. And it was through the math club. We had an advisor, but just also through like the local competitions and stuff that I found this math to be a puzzle-like thing and it really captured my attention.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I sometimes feel like we don't give the culture as much. We tend to give we tend to give a lot of credit to the lone genius myth, I'd say, in the sense that here's one person who made a lot of great contributions to math and who's cracked this
Yeah.
great problem. When
Uh-huh.
in reality, they had great professors, or they had at least one good professor. They had a culture around mathematics that was positive in general and that encouraged exploration.
I totally agree with
Um,
this. Yeah, please go ahead.
mhm. So yeah, no, please feel free to interrupt. So yeah, I just wish we celebrated people like that more, or like that this culture more,
Uh-huh.
that allows mathematicians to do what they do, or just researchers to do what they do, right? Not just Einstein in isolation, but there was also, what was his name again? Yeah, the fact that I can't
Mersenne.
remember his name, Grassman.
Mersenne.
No, no, I'm talking about Einstein. Einstein had a friend, like his surname was
Journal?
Grassman.
No,
No,
go
no,
ahead.
Grassman was the
Grassman.
surname.
Oh, okay. Right. Okay. I see what
Yes,
you're saying.
you probably heard of him. Yeah. So he helped Einstein a lot through the math behind general relativity, special relativity. And then there was Hilbert as well. There was the Göttingen school that helped
Hmm.
him develop his theory further. No thoughts
Right.
played a part. And yet, who we remember is Einstein. Most people remember is Einstein, not the culture around general relativity, and that led to the theory. And I wish that we celebrated the culture more.
I
Um,
definitely agree with you. You
mm,
know, it's interesting. We say Newton was so incredible, Leibniz was so incredible. Isn't it at least a little weird that they both did the same incredible thing, like almost at exactly the same time? It's like
yeah, in the same era.
calculus is an amazing accomplishment in math history. I mean, just undeniably. I mean, it's just an enormous
Hmm.
accomplishment.
Hmm.
You look at the 100 years after calculus was invented, it was all like calculus applications and stuff. It was just like
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
it spurred on so much additional math. It solved so many physics problems.
Even
Um,
philosophy.
Philosophy, yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly. Thank
Yeah.
you. So yeah, it's this amazing thing, and yet, yeah, it's so weird that it happened at almost exactly the same time. Relativity. More than one person had these ideas almost at the exact same time. It's kind of a race towards the end. Um, Niels Abel and Évariste Galois both solved the quintic, which had been unsolved for 250 years almost at exactly the same time. Why is this? Well, it's what you're saying. It's because the you know the person who puts the finishing touch on something gets the credit. But there is so much other work that has to be done, usually, to get them to that point, right?
Mhm. Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, I mean, there's actually a pretty interesting argument that the hard part in developing calculus was not calculus; it was pre-calculus. Pre-calculus took forever for people to figure out, right? I mean, coordinate geometry and all that stuff.
Algebra, trigonometry. Yeah, yeah.
Exactly, all that stuff and analytic geometry, all this stuff.
Yes,
It
yes,
took
yes.
so long for people to find. And in hindsight, it's like, oh, it's trivial. Right? It's so easy. It's pre-calc, right? Right. We can teach it to 14-year-olds and it's fine. And you think it's so, but that took so long. Once that was done, it was just like one or two generations later, and then you have calculus. And it's like it
Hmm.
basically like that was the important ingredient to get to calculus. So it's very interesting. Uh, for Newton's credit, I agree. I like the people who collaborate a ton. I love it when the people who have this communal approach to learning and scholarship he did say, what's his most famous quote? Um, uh, um, if I've seen farther than other men, it's by standing on the shoulders of giants. So, even
Hmm.
he does recognize that he didn't do it alone. There were giants
Yeah,
before
yeah,
him who he stood upon to
yeah.
see farther than everyone else. And I agree with you. It's so much of math is this collaborative thing. And I agree. The culture should recognize it more.
Yeah. I would also like to point out the fact that Archimedes was already toying around with the idea of a limit 2000 years before Newton and Leibniz came up with
Hmm.
calculus. And who knows what ideas of limits we had before Archimedes that led to
Uh-huh.
Archimedes toying with that idea of
Uh-huh.
approximating the area of a circle using infinite polygons with infinite sides.
Yeah.
So I'm also
True.
curious to hear your views on modern day math culture. For example, when we see a paper, there's the title, there's the author, and then there's the math paper. We're all oftentimes what you don't see in the paper are who are the people who you don't see who also wrote this paper indirectly. Perhaps this person's teachers, or perhaps the other papers that this person read, or the books that this person had, books that were written really well, that this person had access to. So I think this is one of the reasons why I'm a bit turned away from prizes that are awarded to individuals. I think it's really important to celebrate individual accomplishments, but at the same time, it's also important to ask ourselves, okay, what environment was this person in that allowed them to do such great work? And how can we create more of that environment? And sometimes I feel like when we write textbooks or when we're forming math departments or when not just math departments, any departments, and when we're writing, or I don't know, we're just designing curriculums, um, this isn't a question that we ask. How do we design a curriculum that will create good mathematicians or great thinkers?
Mhm.
But what do you think? Do you think this is changing? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Um,
Um, yeah, I think so. You're asking about ways to move the culture in that direction?
do you think the culture
Should be
is
moved
not
in that.
there, first of all?
Yeah.
No, do you think if it's, you might think it's already there,
Okay.
or you might
Right.
think it's not?
So
So, yeah.
yeah, I mean, in papers, there was usually an introduction section which
Hmm.
cites earlier work. Um, and it's usually earlier work as like the direct like stepping stones, like here's the partial results that were discussed earlier, or here is this paper had a tool that was developed that we're going to use in this paper. So there is so the, I think research articles do typically share some of the broader culture that is that contributed to the final result. So I do think there is some of that already. Could there be more in papers? Yeah, maybe. I mean, I think it'd be a perfectly nice thing, but I don't know. I'm a little bit
Perhaps
more
not in papers today.
yeah, and it's research articles. Not like many people are. Not many people read research articles. You write a research article, and probably some of them are obviously read many times. Most of them are not read hardly ever. Um, but nevertheless, uh, but yeah, but yeah, I mean, I do in general support thinking about this stuff and giving credit to people when when that opportunity arises. I'm not sure the best way to sort of start implementing that in curriculum, but yeah, I like the idea of thinking about it. So, a related thing, so like in the history book I wrote, after every chapter, I have this section called A People's History. And
Hmm.
it's related to these ideas. So a people's history, that phrase is used in many different contexts in academia and literature and stuff. Um, One use of it is by, it's up here somewhere. There's a book called A People's History of Science. Uh,
Hmm.
yeah, this one. So there was a book called A People's History. This was A People's History of Science. So the first People's History notable book was this book, A People's History of the United States, and it just sort of said, well, the history of the presidents, the leaders of the United States has been told many times over. This is a book on the history of quote the people. So just like an ordinary people
Ah,
living in Philadelphia, you're not the governor, you're not the president, you never signed the Declaration of Independence. What was your life like? So it's just sort of that's the story of those people. And then, but another way this phrase has been used, for example, in this book, is examples of how science was developed by the people. So not by, elite scientists at institutions who are paid to be professional scientists, and they publish their work and stuff. Other people contributed to science, but they never thought about themselves as scientists. So midwives contributed to our understanding of anatomy and medicine because there was a need, right? Babies had to be born, so they figured things out. Um,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
People who worked with metal discovered stuff about chemistry because they needed it to do their job well. Um, and people who farmed figure out botany, and they're farming. Maybe they have livestock. They learn things about genetics in doing this. So it's just a bunch of interesting examples of that. So some of these people's histories sections in my book are about this sort of thing. People who would never have thought about themselves as mathematicians developing math because they needed it to do, like the first one's a people's history of numbers. There's interesting history. Where did numbers come from first? There's a, it's you have to, it's history. It's not, you have to look at records to sort of make your best guess. But there's a reasonable, pretty good argument that it was by ordinary people who were just small business owners, merchants who needed numbers in order to do their to run their business. Next on people's history of trigonometry, and after that, surveying. So people maybe would need to survey land, right, in order to, like in ancient Egypt, the Nile floods people's where people live, their plots of land. Pretty regularly, about once a year, the Nile flooded, and people had to pay taxes to the pharaoh. And
Hmm.
I'm sorry.
No, no, I'm
Oh,
just
yeah.
nothing.
So
Carry on.
but if they're part of the land got washed away, and they lost 20% of the land, then they would have to pay 20% fewer taxes. Okay, because
Mhm.
everyone was given an equal amount of land. Um,
Right, right.
so anyway, so these surveyors would come and survey the land, and they'd have to use geometry, right? So they'd have to figure out geometry uh, in order to measure these things. And there's other interesting things. People who were doing, so some military commanders had to figure out, like, if you have a river and you're standing on one side of the river, and maybe there's a tree or something right on the other bank, and you want to know what is the distance between me and that tree. How do you figure this out without crossing the river? You can't throw a rope across it. It's a big, fast moving river. You can't enter the river. How do you figure this out? There was a really cool way that they did it using triangles. And these are things which, it's not a mathematician most likely figure this out. It's just somebody who needed to figure it out. And anyways, so these are things which kind of get at the same idea of math coming about from many people working together in some way to accomplish a goal. Less so from the one person who does it and then puts their name on it and publishes it and gets credit forever. So, anyways, adding to the discussion.
Yeah. Um, I think a good analogy would be trying to think of it like a puzzle, but thinking of it, but the pieces are like 1,000 pieces,
Mm.
and that even though some are larger than the others, the size isn't, I don't know if that analogy works here. It's like everybody contributing some piece of the puzzle, or perhaps in chemistry, how they have this concept of activation energy, how there's a
Uh-huh.
barrier, and once you cross that barrier, then the bond will break or the bond will form.
Ah,
For example, the activation energy required to start a reaction is 10
right,
joules.
right.
So you slowly feed the system energy, and the
Uh-huh.
energy rises. And the second it hits 10
Uh-huh.
joules, the reaction occurs.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know, those analogies spring to mind when we're
Yeah,
talking about
that's
this
good.
stuff.
Yeah, whatever that final joule was, or tenth of a joule, gets the credit for making the reaction happen. But there was other energy went into it before you noticed any change happening, right? All the
Yeah,
pre-calculus
yeah.
happened. A lot of energy was happening. A lot of things were added to calculus, but someone had to be the one who does it in the end, who makes the final reaction happen. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
that's true. Even in computing. So the final people's history talks about like these computing collectives. So when people, like the first computers, um, and sort of people writing code, were I'm figuring out a quick way to say it, but there were these like
Hmm.
groups of people in like Minnesota was one big collective, Boston was another one, San Francisco a little bit, who were like who were developing so there'd be like one computer for the district, and people could have computing time, and they would make design
Yeah.
games. There'd be like there was like an early football game. There was an early you could play like solitaire or something. There were little card games. You could do like basic forms of email, and it was sharing the computer. Well, how do you share a computer? Well, you'd have to use some interesting coding to do that. So lots of people worked together to in this collective computing way. And for that for these it's very clear how many people contributed because because this is I guess unlike the your chemistry example because it was every little bit I'm going to do this little thing over here and now it's part of the mainframe, right? It's on the system and now other people can use it. Well, I'm going to do this other little thing. And so many people contributed to this early development of coding, which of course today is runs the world.
Yeah. I'm curious to know, I would be curious to know how an engineering student's experience of undergrad would be. My hunch would be that they do not see as many names. Um, in the
Mhm.
sense, in a math degree or physics degree, you would see, okay, Reese's theorem, or I don't know, Cauchy's theorem, or Euclid's algorithm, uh, and like individual names tied to the results. Whereas I feel like engineering, at least this is the vibe that it gives me, is something that everybody builds together. And
Hmm.
because so many people contribute to the field, who do you assign credit to?
Hmm.
Um, I don't know. I'm gonna guess that there aren't many theorems in engineering, or even instances where you're attributing one contribution to a particular person. You're just like, okay, this is how this thing works. This is the math behind it, and they don't really talk about the people who discovered it. Um,
Yeah, I'm not an
but
expert in
yeah,
this stuff. I think, but my intuition says something similar. Unless, of course, you get into theoretical computing. This is provably the best
of course.
algorithm or something. And there's a lot of,
Yeah.
yeah, there's a lot of like, this is the best algorithm and we can prove it. Well, okay, that's kind of a, what, then that kind of gets back to the math. But yeah, that's probably right.
Uh-huh. On the note of provability, and did you a pivotal moment in my math? I want to say math career, but career ka abhi, I've just started my math journey. But a pivotal moment in my education was. Have you heard of this book called Logic Comics?
Yeah,
Ah, okay.
it's on here somewhere.
So, oh, have you read it?
I have read it. Yeah, it's up here somewhere. I forget where. You read
It's
it?
probably on. Yes. That was one of the first. I think I didn't even read a math textbook before I read Logic Comics, like a proper math textbook.
I have too many books. As you can see, they are more or less arranged thematically, but I don't see
Yes.
lots of comics. It's definitely on here somewhere, though. I should
Yeah,
say
it's on the
definitely.
thicker side. Or actually, I shouldn't say that.
You
You have
see
math
it?
textbooks, all of them
Should
are
be over here
thicker. No.
somewhere. Anyways, that's cool. So you like that book?
Yeah, because I think Gödel's incompleteness theorem was probably one of the most emotional aspects of the book for me, at least. Because here I
Sure.
am pursuing math because it has axioms and because it leads to certainty. And then you're telling me that there are statements that we can't know if they're true or false.
Uh-huh.
And then even worse, they're independent of the system. Or no, the worst thing was that your system may not be consistent.
You
And I
can't prove it's
remember
consistent.
having,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
you can't prove it's consistency. And I
Yeah.
remember I had this crisis of 2 days where I'm like, why the hell am I even doing math? Like I couldn't think, as in I couldn't get myself to do any math. So I just stopped. And I'm like, like, why do I do it? I don't even know if this isn't consistent. And then 2 days later, I'm like, what else would I rather do? And I just come back to math.
Yeah.
So,
Well, it's not that it's not consistent. You just can't prove it's consistent.
but it might not be.
Well, true. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
true.
But then
It's probably
later,
fine.
I came to realize even if it's not, does that mean math's gonna crumble? Probably not.
Probably not. Yeah. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. No, I think that's interesting. I think your reaction to it is I think it's a good reaction. It shows that you care, and yeah, I think that's a healthy reaction to have. Um, and now you're through it on the other side.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, that was also the time when I picked up a logic textbook. And keep in mind, this is the time when I didn't even learn. I hadn't even done a calculus course. Like I had
Ah,
done high school calculus and I wanted to pick up a math textbook and I read
yeah.
logic comics and the first book I pick up is a thick logic book, which is
Okay.
ideally not your first. You probably wouldn't want to start math learning logic.
Yeah, don't do
Um,
that first.
yeah, it was a
Yeah.
waste of my time, but
Wow.
interesting experience.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, mathematical logic, it's crazy. You would think it's I don't know what someone might think it is, but it's not that. It's like type was it type theory? Did you look at type theory?
no,
This
no,
stuff
no.
is
So even
wild.
the natural reduction system, like I didn't start at type theory. That was just too
Okay.
advanced. Even
Yeah.
just natural reduction systems, what is
Okay.
it called?
Sure.
Fitch-style deductions, Jensen-style deductions, learning
Okay.
about the inference rules, reasoning about quantifiers.
Uh-huh.
Like I haven't even written that many math proofs, and I'm trying to learn about Fitch-style natural reduction. Like why?
Wow.
So
Yeah, I've
yeah.
not spent much time on mathematical logic, but I have a good friend who's a logician. So I've mostly picked it up through him. But yeah, it's crazy. The the stuff that logicians think about. It's crazy.
Are they in the math department or the CS department, your friend?
Math department.
I see, I see. Okay. So there's one thread that I'd really like to talk about, and we touched upon this when we talked about math pedagogy and how axioms are quite new to not the fact that axioms are new to math, but the role axioms have played in math pedagogy is quite recent. Um,
Can you say that one more time? The sound cut out.
so I think we talked about this earlier. We mentioned this earlier about axioms playing a pivotal role in how we think about math today. That
Yeah.
even though Euclid, thought axiomatically back then,
Hmm.
axioms have really shaped math very strongly during the 20th century. That's how we
Hmm.
think about math these days. In
Yeah.
fact, when we want to think about rigor in any field, that's the first thing we'd say. We need
Hmm.
axioms, we need
Yeah.
deduction rules to deduce the theorems or deduce the conclusions that we want. Right,
Yes.
starting axiomatically. Then there was also the school of Bourbaki throughout the 20th century that played a hugely influential role. Um, in math presentation, starting from axioms, being terse, and being very strict and logical. Um, so using that, I want to jump to the textbook thing, like your textbooks, long form textbooks.
Okay.
When you were writing these textbooks, did you write them with the impression that, you know, this is how you would want the material to be taught to someone who's never been taught math? Because I find it really hard to believe that a typical textbook that people use in analysis is perhaps Rudin. Is famously called Baby Rudin, and it's a very popular math textbook. But I do not know how many professors would want their first exposure to reanalysis to be through Rudin or to be in the fashion, in the style of Rudin. I'm
Yeah.
guessing not many because of how terse and how um, perhaps non-conversational it is.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. I agree with that. Um, and I don't know exactly where the disconnect is. I think there are a lot of plausible explanations for this. One explanation is that perhaps Rudin's book is the way that Rudin would have wanted to learn when Rudin was a
Hmm.
student, right? I think it's
Hmm.
natural to think about your own, you think about your own self as a student and you say, this is what I would have liked. And I think that's quite possible. I have another friend who's he's an analyst. He is, extremely good at analysis. He read Rudin as an undergrad, and he loved it. He's like, this is just so beautiful, and so, the elegance of his proofs um, he just found captivating. I would have really struggled with Rudin if I had learned from it first, because well, I'm not as good at analysis as my friend. I'm not as good at analysis as Walter Rudin is or was, and and so yeah, it just would have been quite difficult for me. So I think perhaps that in terms of my writing, perhaps this is an advantage where I can, um, yeah, people. So maybe I have a better understanding of where a typical student is because I'm a little closer to intellectually, I'm a little closer to a typical student
At
in
least an
analysis.
analysis, perhaps.
Yeah,
Yeah.
than Rudin is. Maybe that's what it is. I don't know. Um, I mean, I think even if you're extremely strong, you can have empathy, right? As long as
Hmm.
I think,
Hmm.
some things are harder, but if you have empathy, you can sort of work to put yourself in a student's shoes and figure out um, what the best approach would be for that student. But I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Also, back in the day, the you know how does a book get published? Well, a publisher approves it. Well, why is the publisher going to approve the book? There could be many things going into it, but if the person who's writing it is a senior researcher in the field, then they have some credibility and they think, okay, this will probably help the chances of our book being adopted when we go around to universities and say, hey, will you please use our book? So, um, so that probably sways a lot of books towards being not written by the best educators, but by the best researchers in the field. And
Hmm.
those they could be the same. Some people could be in the overlap between those two groups, which is sort of the ideal situation. Um, but maybe not, right? And then so yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't want to rag on Rudin for sure because Rudin wrote
Of course. Yeah.
an incredible book. And, if he hadn't written his book, then the next generation of analysis books wouldn't have been written. And then my generation of analysis books wouldn't have been written. So, a lot of it goes back to Rudin. He found, as we talked about, how do you get from point A to point Z in your course if point Z is, you know, uh, elegantly developing integrals or something. Well, he found a route to get there that was quite beautiful. So, um, you know, wonderful job by him. But yeah, I think. But my hope is that this new generation of text. I hope there's a new generation of textbooks that sort of approach it much more pedagogically. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, that would be my dream.
I think it's also important to ask ourselves, who are we writing these textbooks for? When
Hmm.
I, and what I mean by that is, when I'll read a math textbook, uh, usually the first couple of the foreword, of like this, the matter before the introduction, it includes that it has something of the sort. If you're going to teach a one semester course, I would cover chapter one, 1 to 5, and then 7 to 8, and then 9 and 10 are optional.
Hmm.
If you have a 2 semester course, you can cover these chapters and also the appendices, or you can leave them out to be your choice. Um, and so that gives me the impression, and I also read these books further, and it gives me the impression that these books were written for someone taking a course, in the sense, someone who has an instructor who can guide the student through the material.
Hmm.
Which is why I feel like with such books, it makes sense to not be as conversational as perhaps a long form textbook might be, because the book is meant to be used by an instructor to teach a student. So
Hmm.
you wouldn't want to have 20 pages explaining the concept of continuity, because the professor already understands it. And what you're trying to do is create a resource where the professors can use it just to refer to it and then teach using the lectures. That's one objective. That's one kind of audience, or like one kind of situation. And another situation, which I feel like which can be quite common, is the student is just picking up a textbook, and this is their first exposure, and they don't really have a mentor to guide them through the book. And so you need those 20 pages to explain continuity, and you need um, to re-explain continuity several times throughout the book. Perhaps when
Hmm.
you're explaining different definitions of it, like sequences converging at one point, converging to the same limit. And that's another target audience. But
Hmm.
I feel like when these textbooks are written, and when the publishers involved, these questions are often not asked. People tend to, at least authors, this was my limited experience from reading textbooks. They tend to write textbooks as if it's just a survey of the material, and you're not really. And this, in the sense, the student cannot use the textbook to learn the material from scratch. They need an instructor. Perhaps it's because publishers, I don't know if they put a page count on how many pages a textbook can have. If there's a limit of sort, or
I don't think usually. I mean, there's some
Mhm.
practical bounds, but. Like my books are quite big, and publishers have approached me and said, "Can we publish your book?" So mine seemed like they were fine with the length of mine.
But I want to note that did the publishers approach you after your book started selling, or was it right when you finished and you sold it 10 copies? Mhm.
No, yeah, it
Because it's
was
one
after
thing to
they
approach you after the book has already sold well, right?
exactly after they sold well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Because from the top of my head, I'm thinking,
no, yeah,
no, please
I
continue.
think, yeah, I think so. Yeah, if I'd pitched my real analysis book, so yeah, I just self-published it. In case some of your listeners don't know, yeah, I just published it through Amazon's publishing arm, and it makes it way cheaper. First of all, I um, like my like the analysis book. I remember this was a handful of years ago now, but one of the big publishers asked, "Could we publish your book?" At that time, it was being
I think it
sold
was
by
MIT Press.
MIT
Yeah.
Press, and
Yeah.
that was it. And they at this time, the book was being sold for like 18, $19, something like this. Inflation is kind of it inflated the price a little bit to today, but something like 18, $19. And they said we have to charge at least 80 to $100, at least minimum to publish it. So it's like, okay, so every student who buys this has to pay an extra $60 for what? What it's the book's the book, right? I mean, if you can't find people to review your book, to edit your book well, then that's something that the publisher provides. It's like, okay, we can find reviewers for you. But if you know mathematicians who are happy to edit your book, then you don't need that.
Or
I mean,
graduate students that you
or
can use for
grad
grunt work.
exactly, or graduate students. Um, and so then what are they providing? Well, back in the day, it was they would go to every university and try to pitch your book and say, hey, Professor X, please, uh, Professor X, that's X-Men, please use this book in your classes. And that was a valuable thing because how did students buy their book? Well, they went to the university bookstore to get it. So as long as you can convince the
Yeah,
professor then you have sold 20 books that semester. Um,
yeah, yeah,
so, but the advantage of that has gone way down. There's a little advantage, but not much. I mean, a lot of professors choose their book by going to Amazon and just looking up options and ordering one or two, and then just finding the one they want, and then just telling their students to order it themselves from Amazon. That's the way a lot of college work. And so in my view, there's very little to be gained by charging my readers $60 more per book. Um, and also now I have complete control of it, which I like. I forget where this started. Oh, the size of the book. Yeah. So anyway, so that at least I've had a few different people I've talked to in the publishing industry that sort of has informed me about the basic standards of the books, and yeah, I don't think there's big limits. But it's weird. Why not? Because the books are so terse. It feels like they're trying to save paper. It feels like they're trying
exactly.
like
Yeah, yeah,
okay, you have this great author writing this book who apparently knows all the stuff about this subject. We can't get
yeah.
one paragraph of discussion between these results. We can't get a little bit of motivation. Where is this heading? Supposedly it's in their head. Why not write it down? Which is actually the main motivation of the book. A lot of professors, if a student would come to office hours and say, "How do I prove this theorem?" They wouldn't say, "Well, the first line of the proof is this. The second line of the proof is this." That's not the explanation. No, they say, "Well, let's talk about it. What do these terms mean? What's the picture we might draw? What's the big picture?
Exactly.
What are the
Yeah,
small
yeah.
details?" There would be a whole discussion, but just no one was really writing those thoughts down. So that's the whole idea. Just write those things down. Yeah, I'm a little surprised that what I'm doing is kind of novel. You would think that some people would be doing this before, and there's some books who do a little bit of it, but yeah, I don't know. I'm hoping I'm not the only one though. I think it's going to be changing. I think more people are going to be writing books in this style, and before long, I won't be that interesting anymore. Lots of people will have done it.
Yeah, I doubt it because it's hard to do it well, which you really do in your books. But I'm curious. So you're saying publishers don't really put that many restrictions on how you write the book and even the number of pages?
Well, okay. Oh yeah, that's what I was
From
trying
your
to say.
experience, again.
Yeah, I think. if I pitched my analysis book to publishers before, just at the very beginning, and said, "Will you publish this?"
Hmm.
I don't know. I would guess that at least some of them would not have published it because it looks way different than most books. That's my guess.
What
I
does
don't
that
know.
mean?
Like like I have jokes, right? I have all these jokes in it.
You have memes,
That
yeah.
is, I don't know. Most of them, some of them might have been like, "Eh, this isn't professional or something. Maybe it's not
Interesting.
serious
Right.
enough." Um, yeah, I don't know. I mean, and when I published it, yeah, I don't know. I don't know.
Okay.
Maybe they would have
Okay.
accepted it in a hurry. Maybe they would have all declined it. I really don't know. But I do think that there definitely are. There is definitely a type of mathematician who will look at my books and say, I don't like it. It's not something, not serious or not, which I totally disagree with. I think it's just, I think I a good track record to say my proofs are just as rigorous and everything is, and everything is just as good. But I do. It's very conversational, and there are certain things that I think might some people might not like, but again, I don't really know.
Again, it's about the audience. If a professor is reading the book and expecting to use it as a reference,
Yeah.
maybe it's not the most optimal book. But if it's a student learning analysis for the first time who has just taken a calculus course, I'd hard to say that there's probably a better textbook. Like in
Well,
my view, of course.
well, thank you. I appreciate that. I don't know. I mean, I think if I were a professor wanting to teach something, having someone just tell me like, "Hey, these are like the things that you should say to your students." Like here are the different ways because the professor has to teach it too. They don't just write down the
Of
stuff on
course,
the
yeah.
board. They also have to talk. So I think it would be better for professors, but I don't know. But certainly people who are self-learning. I mean, there are a lot of people
Mhm.
way more than I would have thought who learn
Damn it.
math
One
for
second, I
fun.
cannot hear you because my.
Oh, are you there?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you.
Sorry, yeah. You were
Okay.
saying some people. Yeah.
Yeah, I would not have thought this before writing books, but nowadays I get emails, one or two a week at least, from people who are not students but are reading the books just because they want to learn math. A lot of retirees. I'll get emails. Someone say, "Hey, I was an engineer for 35 years. Now I'm retired, but I always liked math. I just never had the time to learn it. So I'm reading your books. I appreciate them, whatever." So there are a lot of people like that too, and for definitely for the self-learning community, I think, as you're saying, for students, but also people who are not, who are kind of students of the subject but aren't taking it as a class. Yeah, having more
hmm
explanations, I think, is appreciated, and there are more of these people than I would have thought.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's great to think about like a world where you have such long form textbooks, but for graduate level courses, or basically math that is not the standard math.
Hmm.
So analysis, abstract algebra, um, perhaps even topology, differential equations. I'd say these are like a probability. These are a part of a standard math curriculum,
Yeah.
but algebraic number theory or measure theory, more advanced analysis,
Hmm.
or perhaps advanced counting book, Ramsey theory, etc., etc. It would be great to see textbooks that are as conversational as you made your reanalysis and proofs book, um, just because of accessibility. Because, first of all, these topics are advanced topics. So you would typically need a professor or a lecturer to guide you through the material. But if you can have a textbook that's accessible to most people and that you don't need a professor to teach you this stuff, I mean, that's great. Then you have math becomes more accessible. Harder math becomes more accessible to people.
Yeah.
So
No, I totally
yeah,
agree. Yeah, if anyone's listening or you yourself, Redount, if you want to write a long form math textbook, please adopt my style. I'd be very happy for more people to be writing in this way. And my guess is that it's going to happen. I do occasionally get emails from someone who's saying, "Hey, I'm going to write a book in your same style." Uh,
that's great. Yeah,
yeah. So far,
that's
I
really
don't think
great.
anyone's followed through with it. They are a lot of work. People are sometimes get excited at the beginning and then drift away at the end or even in
Oh
the
yeah, yeah,
middle.
yeah.
So that'll happen. But yeah, I definitely encourage people to do it. I hope more people write them. Um, as for me, I'm going to keep writing. So these graduate topics, I probably won't get to those until I've done more of the undergrad ones. But yeah, I enjoy it,
Yeah.
and AI is a decent writer. So who knows how that is going to change, you know.
Yes.
But you have to know, you have to spend time with it though. AI is can help you in some ways write books like this, but I don't know. It can only go so far. You have to like if you want AI to write a Rudin style book that just lists a bunch of results and proof, result, proof, result, proof. I mean, AI can whip out
Do
those
that pretty
books
well.
very well, I would think by this point. Especially if it's a subject that's been done a number of times. But but yeah, what I call long form writing. Yeah, I would say that's going to require more work. But I hope some of your listeners take up the challenge.
So I'm excited to see when you write an algebra book because you mentioned that your first exposure was the graduate level
Hmm.
algebra course, which is probably not the ideal way to be to start off learning algebra.
Agree.
So I'm excited to see when you write the algebra book, would it be like, oh, this is the first time I'm also learning algebra properly, like the way I was supposed to learn it. And perhaps you develop a much large, stronger interest in algebra after that,
Yeah, probably
alongside
so.
your students. So one of the reasons that I really love your book is because I actually did write a textbook. It was a chemistry textbook.
Oh, you
And
did.
it was, yeah, yeah, I did. So this was
Very
in when I
good.
was in school, grade 11 and grade 12. What does it, what would you call that in American system? High school? Yeah, high school. Like the
Yeah,
last 2 years
11.
of high school.
Yeah, 11, 12. Same for
Yeah.
us.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah, junior and
So
senior, but yeah.
yeah, exactly. Junior year, senior year. The equivalent, the American
Yeah.
equivalent. So
Huh?
I was making like just like you said, you made notes for your the course that you were teaching. I was
Uh-huh.
making notes for myself because I very quickly learned that the best way for me to learn as a person, not it doesn't mean the others have to learn this way, is when I explain things to other people. Now, of
Yeah.
course, I can't just get someone and start explaining chemistry to them. So I just started typing out, you know, oxidation numbers. That's a concept. Why is it important? What is the concept? I just started typing it out, and I was doing it in LaTeX already, kind of. Um,
Wow.
so at the end of 2 years, I'm like, I can actually turn this into a book. And I
That's
did the
awesome.
same thing as you did, self-published it, made the diagrams, and I made it as cheap as I could. I think it's like 80 cents or something. I couldn't sell it for free because Amazon doesn't allow that. But the philosophy was pretty much the same that
That's
I
great.
want to explain concepts in the same way that I wish they were taught to me. In the
Uh-huh.
sense, the goal is not to save paper, but the goal is to explain these things in a way that a student can, they don't need a teacher to explain it to them. They can just read these 5 pages and go away with a really good understanding of the topic.
That's
And I
great.
think that started my journey of math writing.
That's cool.
So
I love that.
yeah, yeah. I do plan on writing more in the future. I do write short expository articles sometimes.
That's very good.
So yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's awesome.
Um, a couple of more questions about your textbook. Do you feel that there are subjects that really need a long form textbook that could really benefit from the use of a long form textbook?
Um, so it's interesting. I don't so before writing these books, yeah, actually even to this day, I never required my students to buy a textbook, which is kind of strange.
Hmm.
I always just wrote up my own notes. So because of that, I became until I actually write a book on the subject, I don't go too deep into all the books that exist on it. I had like the book I maybe took when I was a student, or maybe a couple books on the subject that I used as taking different classes on it as a student. But I don't know well enough to say, yeah, number three is that's the one where I've gone through all the different subjects and that's the one that is most in need. I don't have a good answer, unfortunately, for that.
Hmm.
But certainly, the
No,
higher you go in math, the fewer books there are. So,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
like if you want to do measure theory, then there are like maybe two options or something that are used. I would think in like graduate courses regularly. So yeah, books that there are a few options would be a better bet that they are more in need of something of a
Mhm.
refresh.
Right, right, right. Also, do you feel like because of teaching and because of writing these textbooks, you've gained a stronger understanding of the, well, analysis of, well, I don't want to say proofs, proofs is so routine, but do you
No,
feel like
still
teaching
proofs.
and, mhm.
Yeah, no,
Oh,
absolutely.
right.
Absolutely. Yeah, everything. Yeah, everything I've done, I've gained a better understanding. Um, yeah, because as you said, I mean, when you have to explain something, you teach it to yourself, not just to your readers, and you find the best way to explain things. And even like in the proofs, right? I mean, there's the way you prove something as a direct proof, but then there's all these other things that you might throw in, some understandings of definitions and the logic behind it, and um, yeah, even that stuff. I gain a more understanding.
Uh-huh. Right. Um, Another question about your book. So I think you mentioned a couple of professors, or a lot of professors now, have used your textbook analysis and your proof books. So what does the reception bring from professors and your colleagues or people who've used your book other than students? Like I'm talking about professors who taught using your book.
What have they said?
What is the response been like? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, very positive. Um, yeah, very positive. Uh, again, some of them. I haven't had like long conversations with many of them. Most of them are not at my school. They're just
Mm-hmm.
I get a random email or a short message or something about it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, usually it's with gratitude. They like the way it's presented. Um, often it's more of like, thank you, my students appreciate it. So, often it's in that tone rather than it helped me prepare for my lectures. But yeah, I don't know, generally positive. But I hope to have longer conversations with some professors who have used it. I haven't had the opportunity to do that too much.
Uh-huh. Hopefully you do that on your own YouTube channel. I think you're exploring YouTube a lot, or this year
Yeah,
and
I
the
need
last
to
year.
start making videos again. I prefer writing to recording, so I keep getting distracted by the writing and then I get away from it. And maybe next week, that's the goal,
Yeah.
start making some videos again. Hope to go
I
through
think you were
each of the
going through,
books.
right, 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 like the exercises or the theorems.
The actual content, yeah, the theorems, the as if you were like taking a class from me on the book. So I've done it. Yeah, so I start with the proofs book, and I've done the first three chapters, and those are up. And hope to. I need to continue. So I want to start chapter four soon, and then the goal was to get done with all the proofs book videos this summer, but I am getting distracted by other writing and come haven't started it yet, but hopefully soon.
Is this research writing or are you working on another textbook?
Another textbook.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Are you allowed to reveal the topic or the
Uh,
subject
sure. I
or too
haven't really
soon?
told hardly not many people. But if anybody's watched this far into the video, then they deserve to know. So, yeah. So a colleague had this idea to write a linear algebra book
Oh,
together.
let's go. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and it's a yeah, and he had some good ideas. And of some very good ideas. And he knows a lot of the applied side of linear algebra, which I do not know.
Is
Um,
he also a mathematician by training or like a pure
he
mathematician?
he's a pure mathematician by training, but he just has sided towards the applied side of math. Um,
Ah,
so he knows a
ah,
lot about how um, how physicists and engineers use linear algebra.
that's
And
great. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, so he'd be a very good partner for this because today linear algebra is obviously very important and has many
It's everywhere.
applications.
Yeah.
Yeah, in computer learning and AI and everything, but also has interesting applications in physics and engineering, and he knows a lot of that stuff. So I wrote the first five chapters and it's a first draft of them, which was very pure stuff. Um, and now we're going to get sort of, and then he'll add some applied stuff along the way, but then also some of the later chapters will be more on the applied side, numerical analysis, and these sorts of things. So I think it's going to be a really good balance between the pure and applied. And he's a very good educator too, so it's going to be good. So yeah, that's the project. Uh, I write pretty fast. He takes his time, which is obviously perfectly fine. I'm more practiced with it. So I think he's just getting going on his. He started this summer. So it'll probably be at least another year before, probably a year and a half before it's out. Um, so it's sort of a higher level linear algebra class. At my institution, this higher level one's only taught in the fall semesters. So I'm teaching it this fall, and I'll use the stuff that we have so far, and that'll help us, improve it. And then he'll teach it the following fall in 2027. And then at the end of that is the plan. We'll publish it after that.
This is great. And you plan on publishing it as a long form, like under the long form series.
That's the idea. That's the plan.
Great. So it'll be affordable as well for students.
Absolutely.
So is the level like I've done? Have you heard of the textbook in Self Rydberg Spence Linear Algebra and its Applications? Like a
Um,
proof-based linear algebra book.
yeah, it's a proof
It's pretty
based.
popular.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Vector spaces and
It's
linear functions and all those
yeah,
basic
yeah, yeah. Yeah,
operators
dual
and
spaces, of course, of course. So and it has rigorous proofs and everything. Is
exactly.
your textbook meant for students who've done proof-based linear algebra, or is it who've done calculus or computational linear algebra and then want to switch?
Yeah. So if they've done so like we will introduce Gaussian elimination, for example, briefly. So if they've taken a
Hmm.
previous linear algebra course that's more on like the computational side with matrices and stuff, that would be a little bit of a help, but it's not necessary. We don't assume it. But that's definitely not our focus. Our focus is on the theory behind it. Um, yeah, and yeah, so I think if you're like a strong student, this could be their first linear algebra class, but a typical student, I think for a lot of American universities at least, it this would be like sort of like a second course in linear algebra.
I see. So at the level of Axler, I think that's a popular
Yeah,
book, linear
Axler would
algebra
be a
and undergrad.
good, yeah, Axler would be a
There is
good
some.
comparison text. Yeah,
Okay.
Axler doesn't have hardly any of the applied side that we will have, and we'll do some things differently, certainly than him, but that's roughly the level. Right?
Last
Gotcha.
question of this podcast. Are there any, I mean, we kind of hinted at this. Are there any projects you're really looking forward to, projects you're working on? Textbook is one thing. Stuff you want to work on in the future that you're really excited about, that you have planned.
Yeah, so yeah, in terms I have big plans for writing. I mean, I so obviously the main thing I'm thinking about is writing. Um, and I mean I so the big plan is to write all of the math subjects. I mean,
The
you
undergrad
know,
subjects, you mean?
I'm sorry.
You mean the undergrad subjects at least?
At least those, yeah. I mean, I don't know. Obviously I don't know how many. It depends on how many working years I have, but I mean, if and there's also this big mystery of AI and how that's going to affect all sorts of things in education and math and writing. Like these are, I'm sort of working at the intersection of these three things, and each of those could be affected in interesting ways by AI. So who knows? That's a big mystery. But yeah, I enjoy the writing. I love it. It's fun for me. So um, yeah, all the I basically start with the undergrad topics, and I plan to just sort of go through them. I have a tentative ordering in my head, but it's very tentative. It could change at any moment. Um, and yeah, I think next one will be linear algebra. And then, but I'm working with this other person, so while he's sort of taking his turn working on it, we'll probably kind of take turns. So maybe I'll start working on something else even. But yeah, a bunch of projects lined up for that. I uh, I also like thinking about how math applies to the real world in interesting ways. And in fact, the first time I ever was like actually working on writing math, I was in grad school, and there was this spring semester, winter, spring, early summer of my second year. I was I got really interested in this stuff, and I bought like a bunch of books. I did a bunch of reading, and I started writing. I started like actually writing a book called Math in the Real World, and it's never seen the light of day. And it was only half half done, maybe more than half. I don't know. But if I go back and look at it, who knows? Maybe I'll be like, oh, this is all trash. But or maybe it's going to be like a good place to begin. I don't know. But I hope to at some point return to that project because I really enjoy it. In fact, I teach this. math class almost every semester for it's a math class for non-math majors. Um,
Hmm.
and I mostly just teach how math applies to the real world in interesting ways. So we'll talk about how math applies to sports and elections and crime fighting and all sorts of different things like this. And it's great. I really enjoy it. So I think that would also be a fun book to write. But who knows? We'll see where that leads. But um, and maybe some other math history type stuff. That's sort of like we discussed. I have this big appendix of all these biographies, sort of adding to this in some ways, creating a book of of bios of mathematicians. That kind of book's been done a number of times, so who knows what the market is for it, um, but who cares? If I like it, I might just do it anyways. And mine
Hmm.
would be a little different too. So yeah, maybe something like that as well. So I don't know. Who knows? The future is a little uncertain, but as of now, I plan to keep writing for decades to come.
Hmm. That's really nice to hear. Like, so eventually there might be a day where an entire undergraduate math degree would have a long form textbook with a corresponding subject.
That would be the dream. We'll see if the dream comes true.
I hope you guys enjoyed that episode. I've really enjoyed talking to Professor. And if you want to check out his work, his books, his social media account, if you want to get in touch with him, I've left some couple of links in the description. His email, his social media, his YouTube, his links to his textbooks. So yeah, hope you guys enjoyed.